Good evening and welcome to today's panel discussion entitled Land Day 48 Years On, A Day to Resist and to Remember. My name is Farah Kutene and I'll be chairing this panel discussion on behalf of the Palestinian Return Center. On the 30th of March 1976, Palestinians in 48 Palestine went on strike against the Israeli government's decision to expropriate nearly 2,000 hectares of land belonging to Palestinian villages in the Galilee. Israeli police brutally quelled the protest, killing several Palestinians, and the strike to this day was the most significant collective protest by Palestinians since the Nakba in 1948. On the 30th of March 2018, protesters in Gaza began weekly marches to demand Israeli lift its illegal blockade and allow refugees to return to their towns and villages of origin. Israeli forces responded with utter disregard for civilian lives, killing over 270 Palestinians and severely injuring over 36,000 Palestinians. Today, we are commemorating both the anniversary of Land Day and the Great March of Return, whilst we witness imminent genocide unfold in Gaza. We are reminded today of the intrinsic struggle Palestinians are resisting to this day in order to not be uprooted from their native and ancestral lands. During this evening's panel discussion, we'll be hearing from our esteemed panel of speakers who will be delving in depth into Land Day, what happened, the symbolism of what happened that day, the intrinsic Palestinian connection to land, its anniversary echoes today, Israel's greenwashing and Israel's responses to Palestinian protests since, and the significance of this day 48 years later. Just wanted to mention there will also be a Q&A after all of our speakers have spoken today. So if we do have time, we'll try to answer as many of those questions as possible. So if you have any questions, please do leave them in the comment section in the YouTube and Facebook live streams comment sections. Thank you. Our first speaker of today's panel discussion is Bana Abu Zuluf. Bana is a PhD candidate in international law at the National University of Ireland, Maynooth. Bana is a Palestinian interdisciplinary researcher. Her research interests are epistemic oppression, transitional justice, intersectional and decolonial solidarity, decolonization, TWAIL, and international law vulnerabilities. Over to you, Bana.
Thank you so much, Farah, and thanks for the Palestine Return Center for inviting me over to talk about Land Day. For my talk today, I'm going to present about strictly about omnicide, which is a word that signifies the killing of all things. And for me, I think when I wanted to write this talk today, I really thought really well, should I just emphasize genocide or ecocide, or what thing should I emphasize? And I really thought that omnicide kind of really symbolized what is happening right now, what we're witnessing right now, but also the fact that it's an important element of Zionism in general. The destruction of all things is an important factor into the establishment of the Zionist entity and also its continuation on Palestinian land. And so I actually today structured my talk into three sections. In the first section, I attempt to sort of read into the Zionist entity's long colonial environmentalism policy, and I provide examples of the Zionist pseudo-environmentalism. I spotlight Gaza in the next section, and specifically the Gazan genocide or omnicide, as we're speaking today, as some sort of continuity of historical Zionist process of colonial conquest. And then at the end, lastly, I look at the current crisis of the international community's interrogation of settler colonialism from the perspective of the sort of pro-Zionist voices that are rejecting the settler colonial label, and then also the constraints that are put and then implemented by the international legal institutions to form their own definition of settler colonialism, or maybe disregarding that definition at all. Just to start, really, the image here that we're presenting is the image of Lake Hola. I remember, I mean, a lot of people remember it's sort of a strong Zionist inclination to connect the conquest with this idea of making the desert bloom. And then this idea that, you know, the Zionist pioneers would bring some sort of ecological rebirth for the land once they are able to bring their European expertise to the land that is made desert by the people that, you know, have wreaked havoc in it. This sort of mentality the Zionists had and the Zionist pioneers had in their colonial mindset. But then the first actual instances that we see of how they dealt with the environment, in fact, prove otherwise, that in fact they did not make the desert bloom. So one of the things that I've studied personally and I've realized was that, you know, the Lake Hola actually was drained, you know, also way before the establishment of the Zionist Institute in 1948. So actually they ended up draining that, and also the area around it, you know, the valley as well. It was a beautiful valley that had lots of flora and fauna, that was, you know, a protected area that was, you know, full of these, you know, biodiversity and environment. This drainage caused extreme degradation, and it was one of the main things that basically prove that this is not just the fact of the establishment of the Zionist entity. It's a continuation, it's a process of destruction of land as it is a process of settlement of the land as well. So one of the first kind of instances that the Zionists really recognized that they were destroying the land and the environment was with a specific you know, member of the Israel Union for Environmental Defense. His name is Alon Tal, and he mentioned and he writes, and I quote, "It's a Zionist paradox. We came here to redeem a land, and we end up contaminating it." And he wrote that in 1990 as well. And he basically, it was the first time that they kind of, it was put in paper that they recognized that they destroyed the land. So, you know, two examples of, you know, the destruction of land has been so far. The destruction of environment has been so far also the destruction of resources as well, the control of resources, but also the destruction of resources. And that would be in the case of the routine kind of concreting of natural springs. We have a lot of them actually right now. If you want to base some of the case studies today, we have Susia in the South Hebron Hills. One of the reasons why currently they are planning to ethnically cleanse the community from there is because there's a very you know, important natural resource for water there, including also other areas in Palestine that have been controlled, and land has been you know, expropriated because of the existence of water. But there's also this idea that, you know, this myth of water scarcity that has been employed, that looks at the fact that, oh well, this land, that it, you know, the water is not enough for all the people in the land, so we must control it. And obviously that specific image you have from visualizing Palestine really portrays the type of water apartheid there, where, you know, Palestinians get to use only a small amount of water compared to settlers. So in this kind of new era of environmental consciousness, Israel is really deploying a more deliberate environmental narrative, really as a strategic tool to legitimize the Zionist state at the global level, but also they're using it to deflect from the brutal business of settler colonial expansion. We call that really that element, we call it the element of greenwashing. So the Zionists really try to always portray themselves as leaders in environmental sustainability, while they continuously burn trees and poison the soil. They also continuously showcased this idea of their ability to create renewable energy projects and some conservation efforts. So one example that has been quite publicized lately was just this example of the Jewish National Fund collecting funds to plant millions of trees in the 1950s, particularly. To sort of plant this idea of green Zionism, and really what they did is they planted pine trees that were not native to the land, but also caused forest fires because they are inflammable, and they also require a lot of water, and so they're not suitable for the land. But also they also planted them on top of Palestinian villages that were destroyed in 1948 Nakba and later on. So you can see that, you know, the sort of use and abuse of an environmental and ecological practice. Is the idea that, you know, it's important to destroy the possibility of Palestinian settlement and development, and to create some sort of coercive environment that leads to the imminent displacement of Palestinians. And so there are plenty of examples, really, of how you know, Israel also employed the environment to colonize Palestine. So if you look at the specific map, in this map it chose the area of Selfit Governorate in West Bank, and this has been basically the red zone is a zone for a nature reserve that was declared by the Israeli Nature Reserve and National Parks Authority. They declared this area that is in fact unsuitable to be a nature reserve for some sort of, you know, pseudo conservation. And what ended up happening is that you know, as years went by, it was exposed that it was, you know, it was made so that they can increase and expand the different settlements around it. And so now actually there is a settlement you know, expanded on it, which is a bit area settlement. And so you can see how they've managed to, you know, use the environment as a way to destroy and also to control and colonize the land. So environment has been used really as a tool for land expropriation and appropriation. So what does this really tell us about Zionism, really? In fact, actually, Mazen Humsiya, who is the head of the Natural History Museum in Palestine, he writes that Zionism is an ideology of death. It's a project that relies on the elimination of people, but also the broader elimination of all it does not recognize. So we can see that this is, you know, a process that is very necessary for the establishment of the state and the continuation of the state. Again, this is also another image of an area that is actually quite close to my house where I live, and it's quite close to Beit Sahur. This is Jebel Abu Ghneim, the mountain of Abu Ghneim, and before it was a green area. In fact, actually, it was an area that should have been preserved, and so far there was no settlement or any Palestinian houses on top of it because it was a green area that Palestinians wanted to conserve. However, after its confiscation, it was turned into a settlement. You can see the parallel and the difference between the images. One is a green area, and the other is in fact you know, a gray zone, and you know, it looks, if from somebody that looks at it, it would look like there was always been a desert. So in fact, you can see this is some sort of desertification, as opposed to protection of environment or conservation. So really, and also like a quite very dystopian example that I would like to bring before I spotlight Gaza is an example of the Brand Israel campaign of 2005. In fact, actually, this campaign was established 6 months after the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign in Palestine was established. And one of its pillars is to basically promote Israel's image as, some sort of, a friendly environmentally, culturally, artistically, and whatnot, just to improve the image and the brand of Israel abroad after its image has been tarnished by its own, acts and horrific acts against Palestinians. And one of the campaigns that they continuously promoted is this idea that the international community should support the IOF because they wear vegan leather boots. That is in fact actually true. What you heard is true. There was, recently those videos were revived of like advertisements showing that that they're environmentally friendly because they're using vegan leather boots as opposed to real animal leather. So you can see this sort of idea today and this sort of mindset that they have. But if we're looking just on Gaza, really just looking on the extent of the destruction and extent of genocide, and really what it is, and I really want to call it omnicide because it is the destruction of everything. What happened really for the environment, at least, that they've ended up weaponizing really essential resources like water and gas as a tool of sort of collective punishment, or creating some sort of coercive environment where death is the only kind of way, and displacement is also another tool that they've used. And the targeting really of critical infrastructure by Israel, including limiting water, electricity, fuel, really rendered Gaza as completely inhabitable as by any living thing, really, not just people, but any living thing. And also we can't really ignore the type of the use of these weapons, and we can't really forget the images of the use of white phosphorus that has been in fact really highly contaminating. It can not only it's also deadly as in it incinerates the body, but also once you inhale it, it's very it's hard to recover from it. But it also, once it contaminates rivers and waters, it's hard to really know whether the type of water that you drink is drinkable. So right now, they're drinking water that is highly polluted and mixed in with sewage water. The life there has been made unlivable. So this whole idea of what we're witnessing right now happening in Gaza is really what we've been able to just see from these kind of videos that we've been able to receive from Gazans. But we actually want to see the extent of the destruction. We have to really wait until actually people are able to go in and see for themselves. And so really what it is you can just see this type of destruction that this an omnicide that is this Zionist entity was established by, but also is continuously in a process of re-originating it. Now we're seeing the most brutal elements of Zionism present themselves in the genocide on Gaza. So we can see here really also this idea, this constant tweets by people questioning this existence of these different conferences about conquering and colonizing Gaza, and in fact a lot of people have been looking at it as some sort of interesting dynamic, as if like, oh no, like of course, the Zionists do not want to colonize Gaza. And that there's some sort of distancing from the idea that, in fact, this is genocide is for them also about colonial conquest. So we see, people like, and really established scholars like Nicola Perugini mention this idea that this is the participation of these groups in such conferences, or leaders in such conferences should not just be seen as a separate and isolated instance. And also, you have people even writing papers saying, like in this case, making a case for colonizing Gaza. So you can even look at this sort of mindset that people have. And you also, another article that came out as well with this idea that, what shall we do once, the sort of quote unquote, they call it war, ends. Here are some scenarios that the international community suggests for Gaza. So right now, even with people talking about ceasefire, even with people talking about the ending of genocide, what is actually happening in front of our eyes is that the military is colonizing Gaza. There is a massive displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. The land is controlled. People who are trying to go from the south of Gaza to the north of Gaza are shot and dead. And we've seen a couple of videos that were, extremely horrific from Al Jazeera of people being shot for attempting to go from the south to the north, where their families are entrapped. But also there is this kind of rejection from the sort of international Western colonial community, the community that is so far trying to reject so much the clarity that this case right now that is unfolding in front of our eyes has brought to us, the clarity of what really Zionism is. Now, Zionism has been sort of in its face has sort of been kind of exposed, and the face of settler colonialism has been exposed. So now you have people from the pro-Zionist camp really arguing, well, we cannot really apply the settler colonial label, we cannot really apply the analysis of settler colonialism, there's a misapplication, university students do not understand. And so this mindset, there is this fear that people are actually realizing that this is not a quote-unquote conflict, this is settler colonialism. So when you talk about settler colonialism, that also requires us to talk about initially, and in necessity, to talk about really land. So one of the really the articles that sort of brought a lot of attention, what was brought to my attention was this article about community members in Gaza talking about how they fear before they fear death, they fear the sort of displacement outside of Gaza that basically makes for them the second Nakba, where they're not able to come back and return to their homes. That is their most fear. This is what is happening right now. So there's also this question about sort of silence from the international community about about displacement, about what's really happening in terms of colonization, in terms of control of the Gaza Strip. So there is a limit there that is also posed by these international legal institutions that do not recognize settler colonialism, that do not recognize violence as inherent to settler colonialism, and they only see genocide as some sort of extra aspect of the sort of what they view as conflict. So you can see even the ICJ case, there are also voices from Palestine mentioning this idea of inadequacy of international law to address the Palestinian question, because at the end of the day, what about the land? The question remains, what about Palestinian land? What about the right of return to the land? And for people in Gaza, just because they are enduring the most brutal element of Zionism, that does not cancel their right to return to their homes, that does not cancel the right of Palestinians to their land and right of return across Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benna. Always insightful to hear from you. And just a reminder to everyone tuning in online, if you do have a question for Benna or any of our speakers, please do leave them in the comment section below, and hopefully we can get our speakers to answer all of them at the end of the discussion. Our next speaker is Iman Abu Sittu. Iman is a Palestinian writer and journalist. As a journalist for the Middle East Monitor and TRT Arabic, she is a member of the Syndicate of Brazilian Journalists and the International Federation of Journalists. Over to you, Iman.
Thank you so much. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. We can start with this. Well, as usual, we see that how the world commemorate Land Day. We see how there are like activist organization, many leaders, and the whole world leaders talk about the Land Day, talk about how the Palestinians protect this land despite the Israeli crime and despite the Israeli occupation, and how the Israeli occupation stole that land and blah blah blah. But you know that I realized that every supporting stand, every word, every speech that delivered on this day was not enough, because like the true meaning or was not enough to express the true meaning of the steadfastness of the Palestinian people. As we see that now we see what is happening now in Gaza, and how the people of Gaza still standing on their land despite the genocide, despite the thirst, hunger, Israeli crime, destructions, homelessness, all this, or the standing of the Gaza people on their land despite all these horrible conditions are the great proof, the real proof to the whole land how they protect the Palestinian land. Well, actually, I'm the one who delivered her speech every year, or write an article, or participate in any event to talk about Land Day. But then I think that, and I realized that all my word and all my speech was depend on what I read in history books, or what my grandparents, our grandfather told me about how they protected the land, or how they stand on their land despite what the Israeli crimes did in Nakba 1948 or 1967 or another years. But today I'm the one, and I'm a daughter of the Palestinian father who are still in the north of Gaza, faces many ways of suffering from hunger, strife, the Israeli occupations. Our houses was partly destroyed. Our neighborhood was erased. Many members of my extended family were killed. My mother, father, and brother cannot find anything to eat or to break their fast in Ramadan. And we can and all these conditions, horrible condition under the Israeli strikes and bombs. But despite all this thing, they are still stand in the north of Gaza, and also they refuse to leave Gaza. The standing of the Palestinian people on their land in Gaza is like the deeper and greater than anything we have read in history books, and it's like the most appropriate things to and the answer to everyone who accused the Palestinian people of selling their land and abandoning them during al-Nakba. I'm sure that 30 March have a very different feel about it this year, with the Palestinian Gaza being killed and starved in defense of their land against the Israeli occupations over almost 6 months. And what is making you shocked about it, that despite all this, the whole world are still silent till this moment and cannot do anything to stop these massacres in Gaza. The question is not Land Day a day for the whole world to show their support or to their sympathy for what happened to the Palestinian people in 1976, or is not a day to resist and remember the international community to pick up the right side of the history. So here we are. So nothing is more important than this time that the world can express their strongest stand to stop all this and all these events in Gaza, all this massacre. And it's the time to say enough is enough. What's happening in Gaza, I think that what is happening now in Gaza is more more brutal than what happening in 1948, 1967, 1976. And uh, so you ask yourself, so where is the word? We do not want like a flashy words, nor we do what we nor do we want formal standing supporting stances. We need a real action to stop the massacre in Gaza. So I think, and I guess the whole world now I become like understand that Israel planes become more clear. It's not a war. It's not a response to act of 7 October. It's a plane that has been prepared for years to whip out the Palestinian people and to erase Gaza once and for all. Unfortunately, the international community has failed to implement the mechanism previously to that called to prevent the colonization of the West Bank and destruction of the Gaza. These include, but also, of course, but are not limited to implementing sanctions on Israel and supporting the Palestinian attempt to take Israel to international community, to international criminal court, and the world and now the world failed once again now to stop the massacres in Gaza. Of course, we cannot ignore the popular demonstrations and all effort of the activists since the outbreak of the Israeli bombing campaign on Gaza. Palestine, we see that how the Palestinian supporters have increasingly voiced concern over the policies being carried out in the Gaza Strip. We see how from the Europe to US to Latin America, millions have taken to the street, to the train station, to the places, to factories, to demonstrate their unity with Palestine, all of them united and under one sentence is free for freedom for Palestine, free Palestine. For example, I'm a journalist who covered these events. I covered Land Day in many in the previous years. Community in Latin America come together to denounce the Israeli occupation actions in Gaza. There is a strong support with Palestine in the Latin America. For example, in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, Salvador, and other countries. For example, towers were lit, the colors of the Palestinian flags. The flags were raised up atop building, and many people chanted in the street to talk about Gaza, to talk about what happens now, the Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people. Even the president of the Latin American countries adopted a united policy of condemning the Israeli actions in Gaza and calling for an end to the massacre and against the civilians in Gaza Strip. I think that Land Day presents not only to mark the best event or what happened on 1976, but also to think about a creative way to resist the Israeli theft and to demand once again for the all international community to pick up the right side of the history. And I think Land Day also is a good and important opportunity now to stop the massacres in Gaza. Before, like yesterday, I talked to one of the activists, or the Palestinian activists in Latin America and Brazil. It's like Shahla Othman. It's a Palestinian activist, and it's a daughter of the Palestinian refugees who came to Brazil after Nakba, 1948, and still do many activities for Palestine. Even he is far away, or all his family is far away from Palestine, but this is still this moment talk about Palestine. And I asked him, when I asked Shahla Othman's daughter about Land Day, she told me that we commemorate Land Day every year, but now Land Day is commemorating Land Day, or the event of Land Day in Brazil. It's too different, because now Land Day, it's not an event for commemorating, it's an event uh, to to ask the international community, to ask the Brazilian community to just to do anything to stop the massacres in Gaza. For example, if we talk about the Brazil, for example, it's a good time to break all the relations between Israel and Brazil. Maybe this is the first step to do something, or to put a pressure on Israel to stop the massacres in Gaza. And she told me that it's not, I'm far away, I'm already grow up in Brazil and far away from Palestine, but I feel from inside that this is my land, and what is happening now in Gaza, it just as it's happening to me as a Palestinian daughter, and my father grew up in Palestine. So that's what I'm talking about. We do not want to just speak about what happens on Land Day and what's happened in 1976, and how the word commemorating Land Day go to the street. Of course, we cannot ignore the importance of these events today, and we need every step to speak about Palestine. But Gaza really need a good or a real step to just stop all massacre that happened in Gaza. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Iman. Thank you again for joining us. Again, to everyone watching at home, if you do have any questions for our speakers, please do leave them in the comment section. Hopefully we will get the opportunity to answer a few of them. Our next speaker and our final speaker of today's panel discussion is Khulud Al-Ajarma. Dr. Khulud Al-Ajarma is a Palestinian refugee, anthropologist, and award-winning photographer and filmmaker. She is a lecturer at the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Edinburgh. She's also worked in the fields of refugee studies, international migration, gender studies, visual culture, environmental justice, and knowledge production in the Arab region, Europe, and Latin America. Over to you, Khulud.
Salam, hello. Thank you, Farah, and thank you for the Palestine Return Center for this opportunity. I'm going to put some slides up, but I'm not sure if they show at your end. Okay. I was asked to speak specifically about greenwashing, which I believe is a very important topic when it comes to Israel's settler colonial policies on Palestinian lands. And the term greenwashing has gained prominence in the recent years, describing the process by which organizations, states, or entities project an environmentally responsible image while their practices suggest otherwise. In fact, one can argue that Israel, as previously as other Zionist settler entities, have been using this greenwashing as a way to obscure or justify its actions, policies, and colonial agendas on Palestinian lands. Of course, Israel's great greenwashing efforts are not new. Israel has been trying to greenwash its colonization of Palestine and oppression of the Palestinian people since its inception. And as my intervention aims to explore the depth and implications of such actions, it is important to trace them historically and reflect on the contemporary acts of greenwashing and their effects on the lives of Palestinians and their rights in their lands and in their natural resources. So I'm going to divide my presentation in two parts. So the first part will uncover some of the myths that the Zionists have used to colonize the lands of Palestine. And in the second half, I'll speak about more contemporary aspects of this greenwashing. ever since the Zionist project started to take shape in the early 1900s, Zionists have propagated several myths about Palestine, often to justify their colonization efforts and assert a historical claim to the land. Some of you might be familiar of these myths, and I believe Iman and Bana have also mentioned some of them. The first and one of the most well-known ones, I believe, is the myth that Palestine was a land without a people. And this is one of the most myths that were used largely to justify the colonization of Palestine, as Palestine was claimed to be empty and uninhabited before the arrival of the Jewish settlers. This myth obviously ignores the presence of an indigenous Palestinian Arab community, and that had inhabited the land for centuries with their own culture, traditions, and societal structures. In fact, since the first signs of settlement, they found that the Palestinians were actually hardworking people. They lived and they were deeply rooted in the land. According to a frequently repeated anecdote, after the Basel Congress held in 1897, the rabbis of Vienna decided to explore Herzl's ideas and sent 2 representatives to Palestine. This, which was called at the time a fact-finding mission, resulted in a cable from Palestine in which the 2 rabbis wrote, and I quote, the bride is beautiful, but she is married to another man, i.e., the bride is Palestine and the land is already inhabited. The Zionists knew early on that the people of Palestine were rooted in their lands. Therefore, it was important to spread other types of myths, like the one where they claimed that Palestine was a deserted wasteland and that the people who lived there actually did not look after that land. And this is also related to the first myth, that Palestine was an uninhabited desert. It was a place where people did not look after the land, and they wanted, i.e. the Zionists or the colonizers, to make it into a flourishing oasis. This portrayal ignores the rich agricultural heritage of the region, which has sustained thriving communities for generations. The lands of Palestine have long been written about as one of the most fertile lands, actually. Where the name, the Fertile Crescent, actually comes from. Roman historians describe Palestine in flowery terms, saying the inhabitants are healthy and robust, the rains moderate, and the soil fertile. Whilst the Zionist claims that they wanted the desert, i.e. Palestine, to bloom, Palestine was already producing large agricultural surplus and was also one of the leading world economies in agriculture as an exporter of goods such as barley, sesame, olive oil, soap, as early as the 19th century and before that. Already then, wide areas such as the coastal plain and the north and the south of the Gaza Strip were cultivated, producing wheat crops, with the city of Gaza once having a prosperous market town functioning as a collecting and forwarding center for citrus, wheat, and barley, and other crops from the Gaza district before being cut off from its trade relations following the 1948 Nakba. Examples of this cultivation are not limited to Gaza or today's West Bank. Watermelons and citrus being cultivated in the Java area, olives and cotton in the Nablus mountain areas, grapes in the Hebron area, tobacco and watermelon in the Galilee, and many, many more. Other myths that were spread about Palestine was the myth of the Jewish redemption of the land. Zionists often present the Jewish colonization of Palestine as a noble endeavor to reclaim a historic homeland after centuries of exile and persecution. This myth overlooks the rights and existence of the indigenous Palestinian population. As early as 1884, the Zionists have have claimed that they wanted to redeem the land of Palestine, the land of Israel, from the foreigners, as they called the indigenous Palestinians. 1901 was also a key year because that's when the Jewish National Fund was established. And the Jewish National Fund was a key institution that tried for a long time to map the lands of Palestine, later to buy lands from the Palestinian farmers, although that failed greatly, and also later after 1948 to continue this colonization process, which I'll come to in a minute. And these posters that they spread in the 1920s and 30s were also like very much part of this propaganda that they wanted people to come to Palestine and reclaim it and reclaim the land. Another myth was the Arab rejectionism. Zionists have frequently depicted Arab opposition or indigenous Palestinian opposition to Jewish immigration and settlement in Palestine as rooted in inherent anti-Semitism and a refusal to accept Jewish presence in the region. And this narrative, again, neglects the legitimate grievances of the Palestinian people who were understandably concerned about the impact of the Zionist colonization on their land and their livelihood. In fact, since the Zionist project beginning, the active Palestine or Palestinian resistance to the Jewish Zionist settlements began in early 1900s and later under the British colonial times and pre-1948 and obviously after. And one of the most probably widespread myths, and one that I continuously heard in both the region and internationally, is the myth that Palestinians sold their lands. The Zionist propaganda focuses on the narrative that the Palestinians are the ones who sold their lands to the Jews, and that the Jews bought it with their own money, fair and square. Hence, the Palestinians should not reclaim it. This myth is often used to justify land acquisition and colonization efforts in Palestine. However, this narrative oversimplifies the complex history and ignores the disposition that many Palestinians faced at the time. Historical records prove that despite attempts to buy lands from Palestinian farmers pre-1948, all those efforts failed. Records show that by the end of the Ottoman state in 1918, the settlers had acquired no more than 1.5% of the land of Palestine, which they bought mainly from Lebanese feudal landlords and from the Ottoman administration through public acquisition of lands of Palestinian peasants who failed to pay their taxes to the Ottomans. When Palestine became under the British occupation from 1917 to 48, it was clear that the British had come to Palestine to implement the Zionist project. It invented all the powers of colonial rule and oppression to impose this reality. Nonetheless, despite all these efforts, by 1948, the Jewish National Fund and other Zionist organizations only managed to buy 4.5% of the land of historic Palestine. This was despite the British global capabilities, the huge capital, and the direct support and oppression of the British forces. These lands, however, still were not sold by the Palestinians themselves. Facts indicate that most of these lands were leaked either through British government grants of the Palestinian Miri lands, which are state lands that the British leaked to the Zionist organizations, or by non-Palestinian landlords who didn't live in Palestine, and because of the British occupation policies in Palestine at the time were prohibited from entering and investing on that land, so they sold it. So it's important to set the record straight of these myths, not only because these continue until today, but because the ideas of the establishment of the State of Israel on Palestinian lands and the establishment of Israel's image as a green oasis amidst a region characterized by environmental degradation and political instability also continues until today. In the context of Palestine, it is a form of environmental racism, obviously, which the Zionists paid lip service to ecological preservation. depicts Israel as making the desert bloom, for example. All the while, Israel continues polluting Palestinian land, planting invasive species, building ecological preserves to cover up ethnically cleansed villages, and presenting its theft of Palestinian water as miraculous answer to the water scarcity, which Israel itself is actively contributing to. This propaganda serves to cover up and distracts from the displacement and uprooting of Palestinians in service of the Zionist colonial project. The examples of Israel's greenwashing are too many to count, so I'm going to mention but a few here, and I'll be happy to answer questions later about others. One of the big projects that Israel tries to paint itself or to create an image to itself is the forestation and national parks, planting trees, creating green spaces, which are typically seen as positive environmental actions. But these national forests and parks, which almost cover 70% of the lands, including lands in occupied West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and other occupied territories, are part of this image, as I said, that Israel tries to portray itself with. In the context of Israel, there are accusations, of course, that these activities have been used to cover the remains of destroyed Palestinian villages and assert control over disputed lands, portraying an image of environmental stewardship that covers really land theft. This picture, for example, is from Canada Park, one of many national parks that is established on ethnically cleansed lands in 1967. These so-called forestation efforts are on lands previously inhabited by Palestinian villagers, obviously, which were depopulated during either 1948 or 1967, or even lands that are being depopulated today. The afforestation serves both to erase traces of these villages and to assert Jewish presence and claims to the land, embedding environmentalism within a settler colonial strategy. And of course, Zionism, like all settler colonialism, does not take into account these natural processes, biodiversity, and the overall health of the ecosystem. Its pine trees, as was mentioned previously today, for example, are not environmentally sustainable nor suitable for the Palestinian Mediterranean climate. They consume too much water. They have fire hazards, and they occupy, many of them, lands that have previously been used to cultivate other kinds of vegetation that is suitable for Palestinian climate. It has also, the Israeli authorities, uprooted hundreds of thousands of olive trees to destroy Palestinian lives and livelihoods in the West Bank and in many other parts of historic Palestine. I'd like to share some pictures from my home village, Ajur, which is now called the British Park. It's one of these JNF parks that is established on the ruins of 7 different Palestinian villages. And again, if people look closely when they visit these places, they would see the ruins of people's houses, and they would see that actually these are places where Palestinians have once lived. But again, this is one aspect of this greenwashing that is very obvious for Palestinians who have once lived there and who have rightful claims to these lands, obviously. Israel also promotes its advances in water technology whilst it controls Palestinian water resources. It controls 2/3 of the waters of the Jordan River and the West Bank aquifers, not to mention draining the Hola Lake, which Bana mentioned earlier, and the surrounding swamplands, which also were disastrous, among other consequences, wiping out dozens of fauna and flora, and that were unique to the region. Israel's national water company, Mukrot, is a clear example of what we can call water apartheid in the occupied West Bank, where Jewish settlers consume, who are illegally, obviously, living on the lands of Palestinians in the West Bank, they consume 6 times more water than all Palestinians living in the West Bank. Palestinian environmental scholar Sharif al-Musa describes Israel water policy as being a water sponge, a greedy sponge. That is, with Israel using 73% of the West Bank's water, diverting an additional 10% to the illegal settlements, and selling to the Palestinians the remaining 17%. It is also currently utilizing about 80% of the Palestinian groundwater resources in the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip. It adds colors to the underground water in Area C and in the Jordan Valley to see how much water the Palestinians are actually getting, so that it can cut it off to stop Palestinian agriculture and Palestinian livelihoods in the Jordan Valley as well. Israel also promotes its technologies in desalination and wastewater recycling and renewable energy as indicator of its environmental leadership. And actually, Iman mentioned Brazil. It was interesting because Brazil had, I think last year, signed a huge agreement benefiting from Israel's water recycling technologies. And it's ironic when Israel treats the West Bank as a sewage and pollution dumping ground. This obscures how Israel destroyed water desalination plants built by the Palestinians and international funders in many villages in the West Bank, for example. In the villages of Wadi Fukin and Hussan and others in Bethlehem, settlers literally dump their sewage on the agricultural lands. The ponds that farmers use to water their plants, the settlers come down and bathe and swim in these ponds, also adding to the hazards and not allowing the farmers to use these water resources or even collect rainwater peacefully. For years, Israel has destroyed with impunity even the solar plants that have been donated to Palestinians, deeming them illegal as permits for Palestinian infrastructure building are difficult to come by, while illegal settlements continue to expand. In one of my visits to the Jordan Valley, I saw how people who have no access to electricity, almost no access to water there, had really tiny solar plants that were donated from Spain and then the Netherlands and Ireland, just to get some electricity and for their children at night. And even those were destroyed by the Israeli army. Surely we cannot overlook how Israel, of course, as well targeted the Gaza Strip with its systematic environmental destruction. Israel, as an arms exporter, has tested much of its weaponry on the besieged and blockaded Gaza Strip. Such warfare, besides the horrendous human toll, obviously, that it has taken, it also inherently ecologically damaging, with weapons manufacturing and testing generating tremendous pollution and hazardous waste. The genocide unfolding in Gaza completely halted wastewater treatment, water that already was polluted, but people at least could treat it and drink it, leaving people no option but to consume highly polluted water, often mixed with sewage, if any water was even available at all. Aida refugee camp, where I live, for example, is deemed as the world's most tear-gassed place on earth, where the Israeli army comes almost on a daily basis, fires countless number of tear gas canisters on the people, also creating all kinds of problems, health problems for the people, already refugees living in the camp, and also the small plants that people try to plant in their houses, and the examples, as I mentioned, are too many just to count. While the information presented here barely scratches the surface of Israel's environmental destruction and racist colonial practices vis-a-vis the Palestinians, it is also important to acknowledge that it has been a colonial stable to frame the environment as separate from the humans, which exists only to be tamed and be used and by a technologically advanced. Yet for indigenous populations, the relationship with the land is much deeper. It is a relationship that, as my father, who's a farmer, says, as much you give the land gives you back. Farmers would always speak about this relationship, that the land is not, or natural resources in general, are not there only to be used and consumed, but also to be respected and to be used in an ecological manner. For Palestinians, their lands are very much, our lands are very much more than resources. They're part of who we are. They're part of our dignity, our life, and our survival. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khulud. It's always an honor and privilege to have you join us. It's going to bring back all of the speakers to answer a few questions from the online audience. There are a few questions I'd like to pose to all three of you. The first question is, in relation to the ongoing genocide we are witnessing in Gaza, many news outlets have begun writing on the wider notion of ecocide that has entailed within Gaza, Israel's ecocide. Could you please tell us more about this and more about the attack on Gaza's ecosystems? Should we jump to maybe Bana, Eman, then Khulud, or? Okay.
Yeah, I suppose it's just a general interest that the international community has with the environment and, you know, with climate change. We're really seeing Gaza becoming sort of the example for people of how when you know, colonial powers, or you know powers in general, when there is a fight over resources, that this might be sort of how things, like, you know, where things kind of arrive to, you know, and it represents some sort of example for people. I'm not sure which UN spokesperson, if it was the environment spokesperson, that mentioned that, as you know, Gaza being sort of the microcosm of what we would witness ecocide being once, you know, climate crisis kind of, you know, that is obviously caused by humans, actually, you know, manifest, not in its current form of slow violence, but actually like become more visible. I think that is particularly just a general interest that the international community has. Although I would just kind of kindly just point out to people that ecocide cannot be understood without genocide. Ecocide cannot also be understood without, you know, understanding colonialism and settler colonialism. So you can't really look at the destruction of the ecology or the environment separately. I know there's an interest. I know people are, you know, trying to, you know, understand like what exactly the particularities of the chemical you know, interaction with water and these type of particular issues. But, you know, right now, Palestine is not a space for research. Palestine is, you know, is dealing with the worst, most brutal element of Zionist settler colonialism. And it's not time to do this sort of readings and research. I think it's time to act, to stop it. I'm happy if people stopped it and then want to investigate later on, but to sort of project from the outside, you know, theories and ideas is not really what Palestinians really want at the moment, if I may say.
Thank you, Bana. Should we jump to Khulud? Is that okay? And then Eman?
Okay.
I agree with Bana that it's not the time to dissect these terms, but if we think about the term ecocide from the part of the destruction of the natural environment and how it deems a place uninhabitable. That is actually what is happening in Gaza. And that really shows that this is not only a genocide in the sense of eliminating the people and the people who are, again, part of the environment, not only eliminated the natural environment, but making the Gaza Strip uninhabitable, so that to drive the Palestinians who live in Gaza out of the Gaza Strip. And this is the settler colonial policy all along, to ethnically cleanse Palestinian lands. So we can see it like way beyond the recent genocide. The water crisis in Gaza is not new. The sole aquifer that has been contaminated by seawater. It has been the case for many, many years. The agricultural damage, which also partially these international organizations are part of it. One example is the flower industry in Gaza, which a few years ago, many international funders made or encouraged farmers in Gaza to go from their normal agriculture of food agriculture to producing mainly flowers and later strawberries for exportation. And people did, because that meant that people could get some financial capital. To be surprised after that, or maybe to no surprise, that Israel did not allow these exports out of Gaza. So people ended up with tons and tons of flowers that they obviously couldn't eat. And obviously that had damaged not only their lands, but also their access to economic capital. Waste management, where the Gaza Strip has been under blockade for, again, years and years, where there is nowhere to access waste management facilities, air and soil contamination because of the heavy metals from all this bombing that is constant for many years, and many wars that have taken place over the past years. The energy crisis, the inability of people to have electricity, the chronic electricity cuts that affect all aspects of people's lives, including water treatment, healthcare, waste management again. So despite obviously the resilience and the sumud of the people of Gaza that Imam spoke about, for many, many years, Gaza have been made, let's say, more and more uninhabitable systematically by the Israeli government to chase its people out, and to make it uninhabitable for the future generations and the current generation.
Thank you, Khalid. Do you want to jump in, Aman?
So that's what I said in the beginning, that what is happening now in Gaza is not a response of attacks of 7 October. It's like, it's dangerous more than this, because I'm a daughter of the Palestinians family who are still living in Gaza, and I'm already born in Gaza. I was born in Gaza and I grew up till like 26 years old, and I already witnesses many wars in Gaza, and I know the difference between the previous wars and now. It's not a war, it's not aggression, it's not like a response of what happened 7 October, just like something to erase Gaza once and for all, to just like to make there's no Gaza for them. So and the proof that why people, for example, why they destroyed, for example, the historical building, or the historical event, the schools, the medical places. So if we are responsible, it's just a response, or it's a war, just like as the previous war, just kick or make bombs for a specific places. And now, but what witnesses now, just to destroy everything and make Gaza and you cannot people live anymore in Gaza. So and I guess the people or the world become more aware about Israeli planes, because like the world realized that Israel did not want now or doesn't want to end the war, because it's not a war. Just like Israel cannot stop this war for just like to end it by ceasefires from the international community. And we saw it before that there's the ceasefire, the UN, but Israel cannot stop till this moment. And also because like I heard many stories from my people in Gaza and from my parents, my brothers, for example, and they're still in the north of Gaza, and they cannot like they did not go to the south. They cannot find anything to eat. They cannot find like a drinkable water. They cannot find just to break their feast in Ramadan. So what the point? What the point to make these people just under the starvation? So now, so the people now realize that it's not just aggressions, and we cannot end it after a month or 2 months or even 6 months. The word Gaza needs like a real practices and a real proof to stop the Israeli planes in Gaza. That's why we are asking about it in Gaza. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Just the last question I'm going to pose to all three of you. The last question is why the concept of land is so important to native people, to the Palestinian people, and how this goes beyond kind of modern imperialist colonial notions of land partition and borders. Just to start, if possible, with you, Khulud, you gave a really good quote, a really touching and beautiful quote about what your father had said in relation to land. If you would like to start off, and then to Emand and Ben, that's okay.
Well, I think one aspect that, at least for the many people, the Nakba survivors that I have interviewed over the years, including my own grandparents and parents, is that they always speak about this rootedness to the land, that the land is more than a resource that we can like squeeze the water out of or benefit from. The land has historical, cultural, economic, and aspects that are more than merely how we financially, let's say, benefit from it. And it has a profound connection with the identity, with the heritage, also with people's current, past, and future. So a lot of people that I know in Palestine see historical continuity in their relationship with the land. They see it as part of their cultural heritage. So an olive tree, for example, is not only a tree that would give us olive oil, which is nutritious and nice, but it's a tree that has lived on this land for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's a tree that is resilient. It's a tree that is deeply rooted to the land. And a lot of the time people would say that we are like these trees. We are deeply rooted in the land, like these trees. And obviously it has a different dimension for the Palestinians because their lands have been stolen and robbed away from them. So this sense of injustice that have been implanted in the psyche of the Palestinians in a way is also very important. I think it would be completely different if the Palestinians decided that they lived on this land and they want to sell it, but they were forcefully uprooted from the land. And because of that, they still feel that it is their right, obviously, to return to that land. They have a sense of belonging to that land. And at the same time, they understand the land. So it's really a relationship that is, it might come out as a bit romantic, but it's really a relationship of mutual love, if you will, where they would give to the land. They understood the land. And although many of those people had no formal education, for example, they knew when the rain is going to, when the rain season was going to be, which lands were going to be cultivated with which agricultural produce, which village could produce what, and they exchanged these products among each other. So it wasn't only about cultivating the land; it was about these social and cultural and human relations that were part of the Palestinian history around the relationship with the land. That I think are important when we talk about this relationship. And it's not only about ownership and agricultural practices, it's about the social and cultural fabric of the Palestinian community and its relationship to and its belonging to the land.
Thank you, Khulud. I think that's often what is a notion that's being picked up and spoken about more, in the sense it's a very kind of colonial and capitalist outlook to look at land in a way of ownership, of selling and buying it off, where in more prominently native cultures it's more of guardianship, and you're taking care of that land for the next generation to come and the generations to come afterwards. Just want to jump to Iman and then Bana, if that's okay.
Okay. So if there's a concept to talk about Land Day, that there is maybe I think from my point of view that Israeli crimes from 1948, 1967, 1976, it is still continuous to this moment. What's happening and what we read in the history books and what grandparents told us before, it's happening now in 2024. And I'm really sad to see that what my grandfather told me before, like 24 years, what happening with them and what Israeli occupation committed the crimes on them in 1948. It's happening now again. I'm the one who witnesses this now alive, witnesses it's alive. Surely I'm outside of Gaza, but my family it's still on the ground and still suffer from many things and from what Israeli does in the ground. So and also on the contrast, or on the other hand, we see that the relation between the Palestinians and their land, it's not just a relation between building or sand or something. That's more deeper than this, because what we witnesses now told us that the standing of the Palestinian people, or the standing of the Gazan people in their land, despite all the horrible condition and despite all the Israeli crimes, told us that there's something we cannot understand. That what makes, like, for example, what make your parents told you that we cannot even think about leaving Gaza. When I told my father, just, Baba, if you want me to do anything just to make you safe or to be outside of Gaza, please tell me. He told me, my daughter, we cannot even think about it. You see, you understand me? You cannot even think about leaving Gaza, even if all this horrible condition they live now in Gaza. So make you you become more understand how these people stand on their land despite of what make them live under this horrible condition, despite all the Israeli crimes doing. And when you ask them every day, I called my father and I told him, how are you? If there's something I can do, just told me, I'm fine, I'm good, everything's is from Allah, and everything's our fate as a Palestinian. This is our land. If the whole world cannot understand this is our land, Gazan people will make them understand it now. If they cannot understand it, what happened in 1948 and how the people, Palestinian people, stand on their land on the bus, they will understand now by seeing Gazan people stand on their land despite the horrible crimes that the Israeli occupation does now in their land.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you. That's wrapping up our Q&A because we are running out of time. Thank you so much for your time, Bana, Iman, Khulud. Thank you so much. And also, thank you to everyone tuning in online this evening. I just want to thank again our distinguished speakers. It was an honor to have you all join us this evening. Thank you, Berna, Iman, Khaloud. PRC has plenty of upcoming events to look out for, so please do keep watch on the Palestinian Return Center's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you.